Hello, everyone. This is Professor Hamamoto. It is October 4, year 2022, 3 p.m. Pacific Daylight Time. Welcome, one, welcome all. It's a new month, and it is the haunting season, at least for the Luciferians who seem to predominate, especially in my area, which I'll talk about. I'm going to try to keep it local here. And in talking about the local, we're also getting into the global implications of BT corn, GMOs, genetically modified human beings. And as I am wont to do, I often, autobiographically speaking, like to allude to my own career working in the belly of the beast, where they workshop and produce this type of technology, which is anti human. So that is the serious thrust of this show. And as we have seen so many times before, the serious hidden agenda, right, which is, you might call it post-humanism, transhumanism, bioengineering, neuroengineering, neural length, it's always wrapped around fun. Fun and games. That was one of the favorite phrases of the OGs and the OSS, later to become the CIA, right? They were just the pranksters, the frat boys who just loved fun and games, right? So, Disneyland, Knott's Berry Farm, amusement parks, and now corn mazes. Yes, ladies and gentlemen, corn maze, cornfield mazes. In preparing for this talk, saw that they have some in Britain, they have some in other parts of the world, they have some in Canada, but once more, it's the United States of America that takes leadership in this cultural phenomenon, the cornfield maze, or I'll just say corn maze for short. And so, being a cultural forensics proponent, that is the only one practicing proponent since I'm it, I try to look back. Where did this come from? And I remembered, oh gosh, wasn't there a film called Children of the Corn? I said, yeah. So I looked it up. It's 1984. I thought it was earlier than that, but well, that's still almost 40 years ago. And let me show you the star of it. I thought he was just a very mature, creepy looking child, but he's, I guess they're called little people. His name is John Franklin. You might remember him. And I guess by now he attends all the different Comic Cons. This is where they have people from old television shows, the Addams Family, or science fiction, Star Trek. William Shatner is a big figure on the circuit, and also more recently, comic book artists, graphic book artists, anybody who fanboys, and they're mostly boys, more so, and they come in their cos. There's a lot of cosplay involved. They go to these incredible fests. I think the original one was down in San Diego. I mean, they sell out huge convention halls. You might know more about it. You probably do. I've never been to one, so please feel free to make a comment if you like, and also share your memories in the live stream, which I have it set on replay so that the later viewers will be able to see the comments. Feel free to comment about your memories of Children of the Corn, because I didn't see it when it came out. I think it was trying to figure out what I was doing in the mid 80s, but I think I'd pretty much aged out of that. But I did see it subsequently, I think, on a VHS. So here's his name's John Franklin, and he plays the character of Isaac. Each of the main, well, in the creepy town that this couple goes into, they have biblical names because it's a Stephen King short story, which I'll get to in a moment. It's based on a Stephen King short story called Children of the Corn. Um, and it's anti-Christian, it's anti-small town, it's anti-rural America, and everything that it represents. And what could be more Americana than corn? I believe we're still the world's producer the number one producer of corn. Unfortunately, I think 85% of it is genetically modified corn. That, however, is not an immutable law. That could be changing because, as I am wont to do in my shows, I don't leave you in a position of fear. I'll leave that for the Fear Ranger, Mike Adams, or these other people who are in, because as I've been saying time and time again, they have become part of the problem. Right. I'm looking for solutions. I don't have anything to sell that's based on fear, right? No coins, no storable foods, no gravity fed water, which is fine. I have all that stuff. So um, I feel it's desperately important to look at people and movements who are making a difference because they are in abundance. It's not just you and me against Monsanto and Bayer or the paperclip Nazis. If you read Annie Jacobson or watch most TubeView channels, it's ostensibly on our side. It seems like it's a useless, futile battle. It's not. And toward that end, I will finish this talk. I think it's the last 4 or 5 minutes or so. So stay to the end. It's a real heartwarming story. It's about love. It's about family. It's also local. I told you I was going to keep it local. I'm going to go full loop. I'm going to bring it back down to the Sacramento area, UC Davis more specifically. It's going to close the loop. So aesthetically, I kind of am following that maze phenomenology, if you will. But instead of making you freak out and slip into helplessness, which is all part of the maze psychology, but there's a whole behavioral science literature on mazes. In fact, I found an old OSS, Office of Special Search, the predecessor to CIA. I found an old manual about screening people for the OSS, later CIA. And one of the behavioral science tests is their ability to negotiate mazes, right? And it goes back. I think I mentioned this before the as an aptitude test or as a screening test. This was developed in the interwar period. That is the period between World War One and World War II, and it's still in use. And guess what? We'd like to joke about rat mazes and um, we're trapped in a rat cage. These are still very much. These are tools that are still analytical, experimental tools that are still very much in use today, according to literature that I'm looking at. Not to mention primates, which I'll also allude to before we finish today. So let me get back to John Franklin. He's on the circuit so far as Comic Con's concerned, and he talks a little bit about his role, his leading. Well, I don't know if it's a leading role, but it was one of the major roles in Children of the Corn. It was a cult film when it first came out. And now it's, as you know, it's a franchise. I think there's about 6 of them at this point. So here he is.
Do you get a chance to meet you? What are the most common questions you get asked? What have they been whipping at you?
That's him.
And then with Children of the Corn, they just usually come up and they're like freaking out, shivering and shaking, and they're so glad to see me, and so it's fun.
Let's start with Children of the Corn. I mean, I think, an iconic franchise for so many different reasons. I mean, what do you think it is about it that gave it that kind of instant impact?
Everyone that has ever driven through a cornfield in the Midwest has always said they've been terrified, the movie scared them. And I think the younger you saw it, the age that you see it, the more you're afraid. And then once you are over 18, the idea that you get killed as soon as you get 18 is also terrifying.
When fans do get a chance to meet you,
Thank you, Dorothy Gorska Tyas. A super sticker. Thank you very much. I didn't expect that. A very pleasant surprise. So there he is, Isaac, and he plays the child preacher, and it's all about childhood versus adulthood. And at the risk of spoiling it for you, one of the major premises here is that when you're 18 years old, you have to go into the cornfield and you're sacrificed. There's a blood sacrifice that's involved, and there's a gruesome crucifixion. It's also a mockery of the crucifixion. I was going to show a scene, but no, I don't want to feed into that. You can watch the movie on your own. There's clips on TubeView, and there's an allusion to it. Of course, I had to read the short story. I remember buying this book, I don't know, 20 years ago. This is I think, Stephen King's first collection of short stories, and he's a very good essayist. He has a really firm understanding of what he does as a horror writer. He's very well schooled at it. He's a talent to be taken seriously, and there is some, for what it's worth, some scholarly literature that's beginning to emerge on Stephen King. Right? There's tons of Edgar Allan Poe. We all had to read him when we were in junior high and high school and in college, and and we saw all the movie adaptations. You got to read the originals, because that's when you learn, oh my gosh, Edgar Allan Poe was talking about Freemasonry in the cast of Amontillado. And when you go back and read Stephen King through adult eyes now, and of course I think I was a young adult when I read this, I understand it more fully, and I understand that he's probably one of these earlier, because I think it goes back to the late 40s and 1950s. We know about J.D. Salinger and Kurt Vonnegut and the Iowa Writers Workshop, and how they were related to intelligence, military, and later so-called civilian intelligence groups. But then comes a Stephen King. He was a struggling writer, brilliant guy. Grew up in the Northeast, and I mention that because one of the constant themes is the suspicion of small town Northeastern towns, right? Because they do have a history of persecution of witches and witchcraft going back to colonial times. And I'm not just mentioning that just as a point of fact. One of my arguments that I keep making, and I'm going to reiterate it here, I'll underscore it, is that none of the problems that we're going through right now are going to be solved strictly through legislation, through legal remedies, whether they be massive multi-million dollar lawsuits, um, or by just pointing or abolishing the corporation, right? The institutional approach, on and on and on. We've heard that. I think the only way we're going to make any inroads on these problems, I gave the talk on Mission Santa Barbara and went into the entire Jesuit Franciscan takeover and the genocide, Native America, University of California technocracy coming in, and now the globalist elite migrating there for what they hope is going to be the end game. And of course, I talked about it being a magnet for theosophists, Krishnamurti, people like that, who, by the way, I've been doing some reading between Tuesday and Thursday, I should say, because I'm interested in elite sexuality. One of the major persons who was involved with theosophy, who discovered Krishnamurti as a boy in India, was also sexually abusing him and his brother, who he brought to the US, and they were going to make J. Krishnamurti into the Maitreya. That is the master of the new age, right? So it goes on and on. Sorry to digress here, but there's a similar theme here of grooming children, um, and abolishing adulthood, exterminating them. And I also see it in the comment sections here, uh, just sort of at random. And that's, maybe it's a troll, or maybe it's someone who's mentally ill. But I always get this sort of anti-boomer, anti-60s, anti-rock and roll, anti-Beatles type of screeds that keep cropping up there. And I don't think it's any accident that a lot of the boomer people were exterminated in the past couple of years as part of the culling. And how does that happen? How does the society, how does the culture allow that to happen? Well, you create movies like, or short stories like Children of the Corn, where the society, the town that's been abandoned for 4 years is run by children under the age of 18, including this demonic preacher. He's, I think, see, was this before see, 84. I guess it's before Omen or after Omen. You see this theme. In fact, there's an entire book about demonic children. You saw The Bad Seed, where I gave a whole talk on Patty McCormick, the actor, and I read the novel, and I alluded to the film. That's about a wicked, pigtailed girl who's so nicey nice, but in order to get what she wants, she's willing to kill. Okay, so it's a common theme. Intergenerational competition and strife is something that even tribal societies have to grapple with. But unlike tribal societies or even pre-modern societies, today, and this is a really, I think, prescient or astute observation by the incoming Prime Minister of Italy, Meloni. She said, all the generations recently have all been given a little descriptor. It's no longer grandchildren, and this is a or the children and the family, and here's the children, the 3, 4 generational, multi-generational concept. But each of them have a little descriptor. And I think it started with Tom Wolfe with the me generation. Since Tom Wolfe, who by the way was a Rolling Stone writer, he's dead now. He later went into writing fiction, full-length novels, but he started out as a new journalist, right? The movement that was founded by Tom Wolfe, people like Hunter S. Thompson. There were a couple other people there. Participatory journalism. Anyway, he coined that term. And ever since then, there's been Generation X, Generation Y. Instead of just people, each generation is supposed to have a sort of a identity of its own, irrespective of the prior generation or the upcoming generation. Compartmentalization in its worst form. So why don't we break out of that? I'm going to stop using these descriptors. I fell into that because it's, first it's cute, the me generation, X generation. It doesn't serve any purpose. I want to stress continuity and health between the generations, the continuity with humanity, including reproduction, right? Not in vitro, although if you need to do that, I'm not going to pass judgment, but we're not going to be 90% in vitro or cloning and maybe 10% of the old fashioned funky stuff, right? Um, if anything, it's going to be the other way around, right? The incel culture, these are all inventions. If it's what that were magnified and intensified, weaponized, as they say, in order to push us closer to our demise. And on that line of argument, just so that in case you have to tune out soon, I don't recommend it because I'm chock full of multiple insights here. But just for newbies here, I'll give you the money shot right now. I believe that the popularity of the corn mazes in the US was initiated by children of the corn. That was the portal, just like The Exorcist initiated a whole new era of people saying, I'm possessed by the demon. Maybe they are, but there was a huge surge in people requiring or requesting exorcisms, right? And it ushered in a whole new awareness that we still haven't pulled out of. And Sherry Lansing, by the way, who's married to William Friedkin, was a University of California regent. It's very powerful. It's sort of like the corporation that runs Brown, the private institutions. These are governments unto themselves. They're not ruled by the state or the municipality. They fall under administrative law. It's kind of like having your own kingdom within the nation, the United States of America, kind of like District of Columbia, right? Right. These autonomous zones, the city of London, Tokyo, that's what a university's like. That's the status they enjoy. And the reason I mention this because we're going to talk a little about UC Davis, which is the epicenter of a lot of what we're dealing with today, including GM corn, or more specifically, BT corn. And there have been some scientists on the University of California faculty who made some important discoveries, who were ruthlessly suppressed and persecuted for doing their job all too well. And his name specifically is Professor Ignacio Chapela, who teaches at the University of California, Berkeley, the flagship UC. I'm about 80 miles east of that in Davis, California. I was until they pushed me out a few years ago because I used to lecture about these issues, right? Including genetic modification, posthumanism, post-sexuality, critical race theory before it was all of that. Okay, so I'm up on it. And it so happens Professor Chapella was a assistant professor when he made it. He was getting all kinds of grants from the usual funding sources, and he was an up and coming. They won't hire you in the sciences unless you're going to be an earner. It's kind of like the mafia. If you want to be a made man, you've got to demonstrate that you're going to be an earner and bring something to the larger enterprise. Unfortunately, he was getting all these grants, but then he found out that Monsanto was accidentally on purpose releasing its GMO corn in Mexico, right? Where corn or maize, I'll give it the Spanish pronunciation. So don't say, oh, you don't, it's maize. No, it's maize. I'll say maize for your for your purposes, right? I really hate it when I get dinged for because it's like I'm Mr. Miyagi, so I can't really speak English, even though I'm a fourth generation American and speak it most better than 99% of the people I encounter. That's the type of baggage I carry into it. So maize, corn, how's that? But he found out Dr. Chapella, Professor Chapella, found out that this was intentional. And corn is synonymous with Mexican life, right? I mean, it's like rice to Chinese people, Indians, Japanese, East Asian people. We eat rice. That's our foundation. Gohan, ogohan, Japanese. Meshi means meal, but it also means rice. So it's synonymous with eating. It's synonymous with life. And there was a loophole that the Mexican government recently closed. There was a ban on white corn for GMO, even though Monsanto was trying to induce their own little Terminator seeds and BT corn on the sly. And Dr. Chapella found them out through his research. He went down there and tested and found this out and reported his findings. And his academic career was almost ruined. Remember, he was an assistant professor. He had not been promoted to associate to tenure yet. And it so happens, I have a direct connection or a secondary connection to Professor Chabela, and that we had the same attorney, Dan Siegel of Oakland, California, who was the former president of the Students for Democratic Society, SDS, at Berkeley. He was a law student at Berkeley. This is Dan Siegel. So when you talk about, hey, the leftists are all bad, and he is a leftist, okay, but he's also a mensch. He represented Professor Chapella and got him tenure and got the administration and the department to get off his back. And he couldn't really help me because he couldn't figure out why they would go after someone like me who's in a seemingly inconsequential area, right? I wasn't in the sciences. Also, his third celebrity UC client was Professor Peter Duesberg, who was also at UC Berkeley. He's the first person to question the stock AIDS story that was being released, right? And someone on a recent show, John O'Loughlin's show, it sounded like some slick UC related PR person who's going, the stuff he was presenting, if I can just speak to that issue. I think it was last Friday. It sounds like some UC flack who was going under anonymity. I was presenting material like him like 20 years ago, and in my full name, not just in my lectures, but also at other institutions like NYU, University of Texas, all over the place, and I published in it. So I'm not, and it's openly known information. There was nothing secret that this guy was revealing. However, he did defame Peter Duesberg. Peter Duesberg is a mensch. Peter Duesberg was persecuted. I think that's was one of the reasons why he was putting it to kind of slip it in there. He did, however, give proper respect to Dr. Leonard Horowitz, who by the way, I spoke to yesterday by phone. I'm not going to say this title on air. You read it for yourself. All right. Tube use seems to be kind of loosening up a bit, but I'd like to be with you next, next Thursday and not be put on the bench for, another extended period of time. But um, I talked to him about being a guest. This is months ago, and then there was something that came up where he couldn't make it. So I said, hey, I'm gonna, because I read the book. It's do buy it. It's available on Amazon, by the way. But when it first came out, this is 2021. I had to go to his website, Dr. Horowitz's website, to buy it, and I didn't get the book. And I found, if you know anything about his career, he's been through hell recently, and he relocated. And I was reminded of that when he picked up the phone yesterday and said, um, yeah, I want to come on and do your show, this show right here. He said, but I've been evacuated because of Hurricane Ian. I said, of course. I forgot. Where he was living was the hardest hit area of Hurricane Ian. But he's okay. He said he's evacuated, and what he's learned is that his house is still undamaged. So we wish Dr. Horowitz well. So these are the type of people that I've been studying, looking at, and haven't even had the pleasure of meeting in my own career. So when we hit Halloween time, and I said, "Hey, I'm going to do something on mazes because, wait for it, the Guinness, it might have lost the title, so don't ding me on that, right? Don't say you're a liar." But at least twice, this corn maze was declared certified in the Guinness Book of World Records to be the largest corn maze in the world. And it's called Cool Maze now, and it's in Dixon, California, which is right next to UC Davis, right? And as I stated, I didn't really give you the money, the payoff shot here, the money shot here. I'm arguing maybe not Cool Maze itself or any maze that I mentioned here, right? But in general, I think these corn mazes, like the film itself, Children of the Corn, short story by Stephen Creepy King. Later, he's made. There have been tons of adaptations of his short stories and novels. This is just one of them. These corn mazes are portals for the post-human, genetically modified future that's being brought to you courtesy of places, these autonomous kingdoms, these fiefdoms run by administrative law, like the University of California, which also has one of the, I think, 9 or 10 national primate labs. They have one on the campus at UC Davis. I've been by there. You can't go in there, but you can certainly drive. It's on a two-way road. It's a huge campus, and you'd have to. I don't think it's on the map. I used to have a habit of walking all in the experimental fields all over outside the main campus where all the classrooms and the lecture halls are. And I happened to chance upon it one day. And the guy who was on the show on Friday alludes to the primate lab. Well, every so often, these primates, these monkeys, there's a species, they're called macaca or something, they escape. And where do they escape to? Well, the Dixon corn maze is a computer generated design where people go and pay 20, I think it's $20 a head, Children under 5 free. I wouldn't take my child there. I wouldn't go in there. Mazes are not my idea of enjoyment and fun, but for a lot of people they are, because it's a portal, it's just like the video games. They're a dark mirror in order to suck you in to this new reality. And that's why I say that it's going to be a metaphysical, spiritual approach that's going to throw this over. Right? They can ban all the cornfields and mazes they want, saying it's endangering your health because it's full of glyphosate. I don't know. But by the way, the University of California, I just checked on this before I wanted to get the date for you before I went on air today. The University of California itself banned the use of glyphosate and on its real estate. They have, I don't know, thousands, maybe tens of thousands of acres amongst 10 different campuses, plus agricultural stations, and they were using glyphosate on all of it. Where the students are sitting, enjoying the sun and maybe drying off from a day on the beach at UC Santa Barbara, and they're on the quad, they're on the grass, and rolling around in glyphosate. So Janet Napolitano, just before she left, right, big sister herself, said that as of May 2019, school was over, right? So that no one's going to be paying attention, that glyphosate was banned from all the UC campuses. So don't tell me that this type of research does not bear results. It does. You got to keep at it. You got to keep strong. And I'm also saying that, yeah, the science is important. The lawsuit's important. Legal actions are important. Notices of liability are important. But always remember the metaphysical. This is how Stephen King attacks us. This is how the filmmakers attack us. This is how J.K. Rowling attacks us. This is how Disney attacks. They always attack us at the metaphysical level, right? In order to bring in these agendas. So well, I think people here who are watching understand it, but go to the extent of researching it and reading it and doing some analytical work on this, right? What is King doing here? What is the subtext? In other words, we're going to be better off for it. And we'll live and prevail. It's my feeling that we, the people of America, will begin to roll back the so-called GMO revolution, the green revolution. That it was called originally. The original green revolution was about making green crops for everybody, which meant genetically modified rice for Indians, for Chinese, for everybody, including ourselves. Okay, before I go on, let me give you an idea of the Dixon Cool rat maze out there in, I guess it's Yolo County. It's right. It butts right up against UC Davis. Here you go.
As we're deep burrowed halfway through the corn maze that is Cool Patch, the world's largest corn maze here in Dixon. Look how dark it is. You're in such a thicket, it's dark. Well, look up there. The sun is shining. Kind of scary in here. And you don't even reach out to scare people. There's nothing in here to scare people except maybe getting lost in a corn maze.
Right, maybe a coyote or two running through, but it's scary enough on its own, yeah.
This is Matt Cooley. His family's been doing this for 18 years. Take a look at the aerial of what this place is like. How many acres again?
34.
And if you look, carved into it, first responders. You have a man, a woman, even a dog.
And a puppy, you bet.
And this is to pay tribute to the people keeping us safe in reality. And what made you decide to carve that in?
Well, just all the news you'd read about, all the stuff going on in the world today, and these people need to be thanked.
That's
they
right.
really do.
Speaking of which, this is Coley Pratt. Big doings on the 13th, a big party out here helping out first responders.
Yes, sir. 13th, we're going to have two different events, 10 to 3. Come on out, bring your families. And it's for the families and the kids, Family First Responder Day. And then from 5 to 10, we're doing the Field of Dreams barbecue. You can buy tickets on Eventbrite. It's a place to be.
What I love, this guy, they put a commercial together. They leaned in on the Field of Dreams. Exactly. Take a look.
Is this heaven?
No, this is Cool Patch Pumpkins in Dixon.
I love the Field of Dreams reference. You nailed it. You guys did a great job. Thanks for all you do.
Thank you.
You're open now?
Yep, we're open 9 to 8. Yeah, I get it backwards all the time.
Been working 24 hours planting corn. Back to you guys.
Thank you.
There you go, promo. That's a local television, one of the ABC affiliates, whatever. I think these cornfields should open around after sundown. Let's say around 8 o'clock, summertime. Late summer, early fall. They should open around 8 o'clock, and they should stay open until about 3 a.m. Right? You definitely want to be in one of those cornfields around midnight, the witching hour. Right? And you're probably going to see more than coyotes there. As in the short story itself or in the original film, you might find your own wife crucified in a mockery of the Christian crucifixion. And that's what happened in this book. Now, the plot points itself are not accidental. The main character and his wife are having some difficulties in their marriage. Right? They're sniping at each other. It's a long drive from Boston through the Midwest. They stop in Nebraska, which is corn country for those of you who don't know. And he's heading towards California. They're both going for a new life in California. And guess what? He's going for an internship. He's a medical doctor. So he's going to the land of plenty, where the French Laundry is. He's going to be maybe a specialist, a surgeon, and he's going to be able to spend $1,400 for a prix fixe dinner at the French Laundry, which you'll get to in a moment, by the way. I mean, that's the hope. And of course, the plans go haywire when they pass through a small American town. There's no sign of life around. And they just come across a tribe of creepy kids headed by Isaac, the 9-year-old preacher. He's a fundamentalist preacher, and he distorts scripture. And his wife gets waylaid, trapped. She gets surrounded by these kids, and they're in their I think it's a Thunderbird. It has to be an all-American car because Stephen King is about smashing Americana. So it's got to be an American car. Well, this is 74. He could have put her in Honda. They could have been driving a Japanese importer Volkswagen. But no, he put her in a T-Bird, right? Americana. And they abscond with his wife, and then he goes into the cornfield to safety there. And he comes into a clearing, and there is his wife. She's been crucified. And I won't go into some of the details there. It's in here. As I mentioned before, this became a franchise, The Children of the Corn. The artwork for this, I was told by someone who came in early to the chat room here. I can't verify it, but I was just alerted to it. According to the person here, that was a still from a remake of Children of the Corn that was so creepy that it was never released. I don't know. I'd have to check into it. But I thought the art that I presented was creepy enough to put up there. So if that's true, yeah, I guess it's not just me who's creeped out. Here is a more recent, I haven't seen it. I haven't seen any of the remakes. Here is a promo for it. Let's watch Children of the Corn franchise.
Meet people?
No. I don't know, I just felt like we were being followed.
I think we're on the deck of the Titanic or something.
I bet you'd kill to have a normal life.
Yeah.
You should just take your little circus of crazy and hit the road. There's someone in this town. She's gonna do something terrible. Get my son as far away from here as you possibly can.
You're the only thing that matters. You always will be.
Who's there?
All right, there you go. Something to look forward to. Not me. I think I'm going to beg off on that. I might watch the original one just to refresh my memory, but I probably won't. These movies really repulse me, especially when I know what the when we understand what the hidden agenda is. Right? It's Greta Thunberg. There's a reason why, on a visceral level, at least people of my obsolete boomer generation. Okay, boomer. We know what these children, these little monster children, why they were put in there. They said, your time is up. You've ruined the world for us, and we're going to get the sickle. We're going to get the hammer and the sickle, and we're going to pound you like Maxwell's silver hammer, and we're going to cut your head off and return you to the earth. You're going to be fertilizer for the new generation of Greta Thunberg. Not knowing that everybody, all the entire species, has been slated for removal, even the little devil children who have been set up to exterminate the older population. And here's I don't know if Professor Chapella would agree with that assessment. So far, his own area of study, which is maize, right? I think, I don't know what his description, biochem. I don't know what department he's in, but I think he's still there over at Berkeley. Probably not bagging the huge contracts anymore, but definitely someone that we need to hear more about. I'd like to see him write a trade book more generally about his research. Right now, he's doing, I think, just strictly these little monographs or arcane academic research papers. Peter Duesberg had written his AIDS book earlier. I think we would have been in a much better position. Nonetheless, Professor Chapella does take time to warn the human population of the threat that's looking us in the face. Well, it's not looking at, it's in our stomach. It's our gastrointestinal system right now. Here it is.
Consequences of contamination with transgenic DNA are many, and they're of different natures, At the simplest level, you could say there are as many possible consequences as there are different transgenic manipulations. And because the number of transgenic manipulations is endless, people are manipulating or trying to manipulate corn, for example, to produce pharmaceuticals, to produce plastics, to produce, there is this horrendous spermicidal corn, there is also to produce that insecticide, also to be resistant to herbicides and so on. So you just dream it. Somebody is trying to manipulate corn for that purpose. So each one of those products, or so-called products, each one of those manipulations will have different consequences. The Bt producing corn, for example, the corn producing a toxin that kills insects, has serious consequences because it's leaking that insecticide into the environment, for example, through the roots. We now know that a lot of that Bt toxin goes into the soil and alters the microbial and insect community in the soil. The herbicide expressing genes or plants also has consequences because it's going to alter the way the crop as well as its relatives will respond to the herbicide. You have the development of herbicide.
And as some of you might recall, Monsanto, which was producing the glyphosate, and the UC was a huge recipient of a lot of money coming from Monsanto. They were also producing the herbicides that were being sprayed over our ally, South Vietnam, to kill the canopy that the Viet Cong and the Chacoms were hiding under, right? Just destroy the forest so you can see all them nasty gorillas coming in. That's Agent Orange. And of course, it's created multi-generational health problems for Vietnamese people, Cambodian, Laotian, and American veterans and civilian workers and Australians, whoever was there was so. You can live in denial if you want, but you can see that this is a global system and process that's being put in play here, and it goes beyond the corporate. I think it's a metaphysical evil. All right, let me, before I run out of time here, let me run this other clip that I prepared.
So
This is what they're doing in Mexico.
These are the world-famous floating gardens of the Aztec civilization. It's a rural lifestyle in southern Mexico City. With its network of canals, nature is everywhere. All his life, 61-year-old Germán Diaz has been navigating the canals of this ancient agricultural zone. Germán shows us his piece of the floating fields. For hundreds of years, humans have been planting corn here. His ancestors taught him to think of corn as a sacred child, one who brings life.
Corn for us is an infant. It is a child when we remove its seeds. It is the precious child. It is the sun child, because if the sun does not rise, the corn does not grow.
He says this dark, rich soil provides nutrients for the corn that grows here. Germán takes us to see the seeds he will plant in April. Like his ancestors, he has dedicated his life to protecting native corn. Germán sees imported genetically modified corn as a threat.
This seed that you see here, we have many ways to replicate it. Transgenic seeds would destroy this. If we try save our corn for pollination, transgenic seeds could begin to contaminate ours.
Mexico is already a self-sufficient producer of white corn. The government recently announced a ban on genetically modified yellow corn, which mostly comes from the United States. Since the opening of Mexico's economy in the mid-1990s, consumption of junk foods and high-calorie soft drinks has been skyrocketing. The health impact is clear. In 2018, the Secretary of Health found that 75% of all Mexicans are obese.
There's been found to be correlation between an increased consumption of high fructose syrup products that it's used to sweeten soft drinks and other type of food.
In southern Mexico City.
It's high fructose corn syrup. I don't know why she didn't put that key word in there. So there's a whole range of health problems that this bio inhuman system that's been engineered, that's being put in place, is responsible for, right? And we're going to tag. I mean, look at that farmer, right? You said corn is like a sacred child. Not the demon child of Children of the Corn, but it's a sacred child. You have to take care. You have to nurture it and make sure that it's kept healthy and wholesome for subsequent generations. Right? It's about generations. It's about continuity of the human species. And as you know, it's not just about corporate greed and profit, because that's one of the failings of a lot of mainstream and even alternative documentary. Oh, it's just corporate profit. Yeah. They're making hand over fist every quarter. But as you know, it's a metaphysical struggle between good and evil. The forces of evil, right? The satanic forces want to destroy beauty, human beauty as well as natural beauty, plants, flowers, animals, but human beauty, health, and the species itself. That's where we're at right now. Okay, let me just shift gears to a lower gear, to a higher gear. I promised you, I'm not going to leave you in a state of fear, anxiety, or frustration, or worse yet, resignation. I'm going to close the loop. We went from Dixon, California, which might as well be Davis. It's right next door, and it's corn land, and the University of California, Davis is the agricultural station of the UC system. I'm sure they've taken seminars, campus, about corn and how to efficiently put Monsanto products on their fields, right? So we're going to end up with another UC Davis connection, and this woman has happens to be Sally Schmidt, Schmitt, a German-American woman who's from not far out of, I think it's Sacramento County, still Roseville, which is on the outskirts of Sacramento City. She grew up, well, it'll come out in the little clip I have here, but I thought it was so great that she is a graduate of UC Davis before it was sold out to NATO and the Pentagon and to the large military industrial corporations. This is back in the 50s when she was majoring in home economics. And she went on, you don't know her name, Sally Schmidt, but she is the mother of California cuisine. It's not Alice Waters. It's not even Jeremiah Tower, who is, by the way, the creative mind behind Alice Waters. He was the chef, Jeremiah Tower. And she is the founder, guess what, of French Laundry. It's her and her husband who founded. I'll let her tell the story here. So there you go. It's about family. It's about a great love story, and it's about innovating and just listening to the seasons of the earth and the crops and the foods and going with them and making people happy with the love you create in managing incredible meals, on putting them on the table. And that's where we're going, ladies and gentlemen. That's where we're heading into that model. What is old is new. Here we go. Sally Schmidt, remember her name. She died in 2022. There should be a building named after her at UC Davis, because she's probably one of the most illustrious alumnus that have ever graduated from that institution.
One of the first California cooks to cook real California food. Talk about California cuisine. Of course, Alice Waters with Chez Panisse. Wolfgang Puck. Really big for a while. Packaged food, TV show. Thomas is another one. Thomas Keller.
I'm Thomas Keller, and this is my masterclass.
Chef Thomas Keller created and oversees some of the world's most acclaimed restaurants, including the French Laundry.
The French Laundry.
French Laundry.
The French Laundry.
The French Laundry, the best restaurant in the world. Twice they have done that.
That's Thomas Keller.
Thomas Keller has won just about every award you can imagine. A whole constellation of Michelin stars.
Well, there was no Thomas Keller in those days. It was our French Laundry. You don't know that story? I was born in Roseville, outside of Sacramento, 1932. Major trains came through there to be iced down. My father worked for the ice plant. They made, well, huge ice cubes to keep the produce cold on the way from California to the East Coast. That was their refrigerator.
So that the fruit, oranges, apples, can be rushed to the market.
On the PFE, Pacific Fruit Express.
The lifeblood of the nation.
That was the beginning of the whole supermarket situation, and the connection with our food went missing. Everything became less local and more commercial. Meanwhile, in Roseville, we were living off the land. From lettuce to potatoes. We had a big vegetable garden. It was hard work physically, but it was a little bit of heaven. With my dad at the ice plant, my mom, she had her work cut out for her. She taught me how to take pride in being a woman. That the work we did was as important as anything that any man would do. We were a food-centric family. Parties revolved around food, braised meats, vegetables, and a lot of citrus, of course. Everything in season. It was California cuisine without ever hearing the term. And I learned at my mother's knee to produce a dinner all by myself. When I graduated from high school at 16, my father wanted me to stay at home, but my mother put her foot down and said no. She needs to get out of here and see the rest of the world. I was a home ec major at University of California at Davis. Very academic. The science of cooking is really what they taught. What makes egg whites do what they do. But there weren't women chefs in those days.
I guess her college years are probably in the mid 50s, perhaps late 50s. And as most of you know, it's not just UC Davis, but the universities in general were acquired by these major Wall Street investment firms that were pushing all the different 1950s convenience foods, right? Canned foods, the TV dinners. Television was promoting it. We've talked about this any number of times. The supermarket was new in the 1950s. In the old days, the idea of just going to one gigantic place and buy everything that supposedly you need in order to eat and live and survive. That's crazy. And now it's gone way beyond supermarkets where everything's packed. Well, there are certain sections. I have a local store here that has some fresh raw foods, but it's just a tiny part of the market. But there is a co-op. There's a Sacramento Food Co-op. There's a Davis Food Co-op. Most every large city has some sort of food co-op that is against the chain grocery store model. And that's one suggestion, by the way, a change you can make immediately. And you can say, well, gas is $6 a gallon. That's what it is now in California. I think it's $6.50. Well, you can get that stuff delivered now. You can order it online. So you have that option. But in those, you can see Roseville back then, still now, was largely it was a world away from Davis. It was like going off to another country, right? Her dad wanted to keep her on the farm, but that's how she grew up. That's how most Americans grew up. All right, I'm trying to put this in a proper perspective. That what we're going through now is a relatively recent phenomenon, and it's not irreversible. In fact, it could even be improved, even on TubeView. And this is what I like to do instead of listening to all the fear porn and all the indie channels talking about how the Chicoms are buying up everything. They got control of our food supply. They never mentioned Monsanto or glyphosate or Agent Orange. It's always the Chicom. They all have to put some kind of racial demon out there in order to scare the bejesus out of everybody. Not to say that the good guys, all right? That's not what I'm saying here. But instead of watching all the fear porn and the Fear Ranger and all those other shows, I watch these little YouTube channels where this guy's growing organic white corn or yellow corn. You pick whatever you like out of his own home, not even a garden. It's in these containers. He can grow those. And that's just one example. There's all kinds of instructional material out there that we can all benefit and learn from. And not only is it highly instructional for our own survival, our own nutrition, to clear out our GI system, our gastrointestinal, and to make it pristine, again, restore the health, but it's also highly, let's say, enlivening. Let's put it that way. Most of the material that we're being served up is demoralizing. It's coming from the Five Eyes. It comes from our own community of indie journalists. Total demoralization, right? let's find another way. Let's start from a position of health, of strength, truth, and moralization instead of demoralization. So just kind of wean your, I know it's kind of like you get used to the toxins in your body. We're getting used to, we had, and I include myself, by the way. That's why I had to purge myself, right? I didn't want a little 9-year-old boy to come at me with a sickle and say, I'm going to purge you from the human. I decided to go on fast myself and just reevaluate what I was doing. Uh, so instead of me falling prey to all this negativity and ill health, it's being spewed out of people like Ben Shapiro, the health of the Fear Ranger, and Stu Peters, and Sebastian Gorka and Dinesh D'Souza, all the new people who've been rolled in to keep us in a state of perpetual fear and demoralization and impotence, political impotence, shut them out and start bringing in the fresh food and the fresh life into your world. And that includes all of humanity. Protect the children. Warn them about the corn mazes. It may seem cool. You're a teenager. You like to be scared of something that you want to do with your friends, but say, hey, have you really checked out the dark history of the mazes? We don't have time to go into it, but this is more of an academic book. They talk about the original maze. This is how we learned it in elementary school. Now at mazes, it's an inversion, right? Good is bad, bad is. But when we learned it, mazes were not where you wanted to be. It's Greek mythology, Ariadne, right? You follow the thread, the silver thread, into the center of the maze, and who's there? It's a minotaur, half man, half bull, and he's going to destroy you. Right? That was one of the main our understandings of what mazes are. They're not necessarily good, and of course, they had different uses through time, right? And there's a maze in Shot Cathedral that he talks about here. They're musical mazes, right? That go round and round, that people such as Mozart and all these other music occultists were involved with, and most of the major composers that we know from the Western tradition, they were heavily steeped in the occult. And again, that's why I will conclude with saying that the solutions to these issues that I'm bringing up here are metaphysical at bottom and have to be approached as such. Thank goodness for Professor Chappella. He does the hard science behind it. But I'm also going to listen to the native man who's working those fame. They've been there for generations. They're still there, these floating gardens. Ingenious agricultural innovation where they can grow their own livelihood generations. I want to check into his wisdom. I want to hear interviews with him. I want to read interviews and find out, how they do it. And I think that's where we're going to prevail, because AI and all the other systems of control are not going to be able to prevail over that. So let's hang in there. Stay out of the corn mazes. I'm not judging you if you like to go on them. I'm not judging if you have a yearly pass to Disneyland, but just keep all this other this information foremost in your mind, and come away from them. Tell us about the maze. Write about it. I want to know about it. If you want to come on this channel next time, or just drop me a line, we'll have like a Brady Bunch deal or whatever, Hollywood Squares, and everybody can talk about their experience in one of them scary mazes. Because I know nothing about it, and I'll interview you. You can tell us how great it is, and how you got your first kiss in the movie theater when you and your boyfriend were watching Children of the Corn. All right, on that note of love and romance and reproduction, I will bid you goodbye. I'll see you back on Thursday. I don't have a clue on what I'm going to be presenting on Thursday, but such are the challenges that I welcome. Thank you very much. And I don't know if I'm going to be able to maintain the continuity, but I'm going to try to make October sort of Halloween-y. Okay, and we're going to culminate at the end of the month with a Halloween special of some sort. I'm going to try to deal more with elements of the occult that we don't necessarily recognize. And one of them is, hopefully, that's one of the major takeaway points: corn mazes, portals, demonic portals. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. We'll see you, God willing, on Thursday. Bye.